On today's episode of the Black Studies Podcast, we have Dr. Johnathan White. Born in Norfolk, Virginia, Dr. White graduated from Clark Atlanta University with a BA in political science. He earned his doctorate from the University of Pittsburgh, specializing in modern U.S. and African American history. He is currently an associate teaching professor at Penn State, Greater Allegheny. He has taught courses in history, African American studies, Black arts, and leadership development. He co founded the Study of Hip Hop Conference and the Stewart and Jones Scholar Leadership Program. He is a founding member of the Crossing Bridges Committee, which serves the surrounding community. In addition, he chairs the Anti Racism Task Force at PSUGA. He is also creator of the Black Woman Reaffirmed video project. His upcoming album, Love Algorithms, is an eclectic mix of poetry, hip hop, and spoken word. Finally, he is co-authoring a book, A Love We Need, which examines what a divided America can learn from 50 years of hip-hop culture. Dr. White was awarded the Dr. James Robinson Equal Opportunity Award, honoring those who fight for equality at Penn State in 2021. He received the Atherton Excellence in Teaching Award in 2021 as well. In 2022, he was a Pittsburgh Courier Men of Excellence honoree, recognized in the field of education. Finally, in 2023, he was accepted as the Equity Pedagogy Scholar for Penn State Greater Allegheny. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Black Studies Podcast. On today's episode, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Johnathan White. How are you doing today, Dr. White?
I'm doing great. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. My pleasure.
So let's dive in. So how did you get into Black Studies as a field, and what keeps you committed to the field of Black Studies?
Yeah, well, it's a long story. I try to shorten it. I matriculated at the Clark Atlanta University, and I was a pre-law emphasis. And so my goal was to go to law school. Senior year, I had a professor, Dr. Michael S. Bailey, who had both a law degree and a grad degree. And he said, law school indoctrinates you. Grad school, you get to create knowledge. We need more Black people creating knowledge. So by then it was my senior year. I graduated third in my class, but I was doubtful of whether I still wanted to do law. Right? Environmental law actually was my emphasis. And that summer after graduating, I remember I was working at several jobs, kind of just biding my time. I was in the break room. I was working at Super K, Virginia Beach. I worked there just trying to find, and I'm in the break room and I'm reading Malcolm X during my little 15-minute break, the autobiography of Malcolm X, which was one of the books I had read in college. And it dawned on me, Dr. Newby, that I would do this for free, right? Just being able to share this knowledge, being able to talk about it. So that was kind of my initial immersion. What keeps me committed is for me, many things. First of all, I'm a man of Christian faith, so it feels like ministry to me. It's a calling to give people this knowledge and what we can glean from it. But as Black studies to me is intimate, right? It's like an intimate love. It's not just as someone who grew up studying history. It was always this static recitation of facts, right? Dead white men who've done, quote, great things. And Black studies felt so intimate. It's like a woman embrace of a lover while the rain falls gently outside, right? It felt that way. It allowed me to explore me, right? And hold a mirror up to me. And so that keeps me committed, along with what Darlene Clark Hines says in the characteristics of the Black study mind. Like being a Black study scholar means you engage with intersectionality, oppression and resistance, solidarity. You understand diasporic comparative perspectives, nonlinear thinking. So all the things that we need in the current climate of this world, Black studies facilitates that.
Thank you. So you just mentioned this briefly, but like the history component, right? So your training is in U.S. and African American history. How do you situate yourself in relationship to history, Black studies, and even if you want to talk a little bit about how you might situate yourself in relationship to poli-sci, since that was your BA major?
Well, I first need to pay homage to one of my mentors, is Dr. James Stewart, legendary Black Studies professor at Penn State, the first professor when I got to Penn State who really worked with me intensely. He actually wrote a book called Transdisciplinary Approaches to Black Studies. So, I come from the womb of Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, into Penn State with scholars who are very skilled at interdisciplinary, multi-trans. And honestly, Doc, part of me bringing my whole self into the field is I take cues from the ancestors in terms of how to cross multiple disciplines, right? So Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois was as much a historian as he was a sociologist and a novelist. Carter G. Woodson was a generalist, right? In particular, Black Negro achievement, as he called it. But Langston Hughes, who's one of my favorite poets, was not only an essayist and a poet, but if we think about it, he was a social documentarian, right? He's looking at Black people from below. So as I'm coming across these individuals in my studies, what I've learned to do over the years is take my whole self into the classroom. So for instance, me being a Christian minister, as I start to merge history and theology, I'm trying to understand, how do Black people resist an image of an impersonal God when they've been given so much incorrect exegesis across the years? Like, how do they still come up with this image of a God who can see their personal situation? I'm thinking about leadership development, and I'm exposing students to case studies of Black leaders, and we come across a Julian Bond who says, wait a minute, we articulated Black revolution in the 60s, but I don't know if we were about that, right? In other words, we didn't carry out some of the grand ideas we had. And so now with the students, you're saying, well, what were some of the things they accomplished, and why did they fail, and how do we push it forward? So I'm thinking about, as I'm educating, I'm the founder, along with Dr. Anthony Mitchell, of a retention program at a PWI for male students of color. And it dawned on us, like, why are we using so many Eurocentric philosophies, educational philosophies, to try to help Black students at PWIs? Why aren't we not reaching back to the Mayat, Nguzu Saba, Afrocentric philosophies to think about, as Dr. Daniel Black talks about, rites of passages for in ancient African societies that shepherded Black men to adulthood? And I'm like, well, wait a minute, why can't we look back at these philosophies and translate them at PWIs for our Black students, and help usher many of these young Black men, who many of them grew up without fathers, at least on our campus, and help them by using that lens. So for me to be transdisciplinary, to bring your full self, to help students understand that Black English is to be bilingual, right? It's to be bilingual, not simply speak incorrect English, is something that I really enjoy doing, and I feel is actually necessary. That's the ethos of Black Studies, was that it was interdisciplinary from the start.
Absolutely. So I want to follow up on that. I just had another conversation with Dr. Jimmy Butts, and he really talked a lot about the role of religion, like in Black Studies, right? And how sometimes that is underappreciated in the institutionalized version of the field. So I wanted to ask you how you see, or to elaborate, right, on how you see religion, and I guess Christianity specifically, since you are a Christian minister, playing into shaping or being shaped by Black Studies.
Mm-hmm. Well, part of it is that one of the sources I used, and thank you for that question, as I think about theology, Black Studies, is a couple of touch points that I try and reach. One is, and look, and when you're in this profession, you're teaching certain classes, you have a certain amount of time, you can't always go as in depth as you like. So I find myself having to touch on certain things. So one of the things you want to help students understand, that there's a long tradition of faith, not only in Africa, but throughout the transatlantic slave trade. And so you want to help students understand some of the faith traditions that are, quote, brought over, but also some that were practiced in Africa.
Mm-hmm.
and in particular that Christianity is not a white man's religion, right? Let's go back and see where it actually started, how it started, and then how it's in many ways whitewashed and then given back to the enslaved and in some aspects. And then also I think uh, as I'm trying to help students understand some of the early religious practices, again, before enslavement, transatlantic enslavement, also in Africa, then you want them to see the integral role of the Black church, quote, throughout history, American history. So somebody like a Jamar Tisby, who wrote The Color of Compromise, really understanding that you have the white church and almost like the Black church operating side by side and yet seeing the world differently. Or somebody like a Bishop Henry McNeil Turner, who's demonstrating a diasporic faith, in which he says we should be praying for our brothers and sisters in Africa and the Caribbean. How can you be Black in America and not see that connection, not see yourself connected? And then as we move through to the modern freedom struggle, we're looking at Dr. James Cone, Black liberation theology. We're looking at the Nation of Islam. Why do some people feel like Christianity wasn't sufficient? Even through the lens of somebody like a Dr. King, who's writing Letter from a Birmingham jail. I'm writing to the Black church and the white church, right? It can't just be patient. How long do you want us to be patient? Or it can't just be wait till we get to heaven, right? And then we get the milk and the honey. So, and he's doing, if you listen to his sermons, he's doing a serious critique of, wait a minute, we want our white, yes, he has a sermon. He said, we want our white robes in heaven, but we want some food in our bellies, like while we're on earth. Mm-hmm. So he's coming out of the Christian tradition and saying, wait a minute, there has to be a tangible demonstration of not just articulating the faith, but what does it mean to walk out loving your neighbor? Like, what is it, the Good Samaritan, what is that saying? Who is your neighbor? And what does that mean to walk it out? So I think there are times when I have a few people in my classroom, students who, if they're deep in faith as well, I have to hold myself back because I start to get excited thinking about how Black people, Dr. Cornel West says, how is it that you can have the horrendous treatment Black people have received in America and you can still hold on to love? You can still hold on to an image of God that loves you, that Imago Dei, we made in the image of God. And to me, that's, Dr. Newby, that's an endless fascination of thinking about how this transatlantic enslavement, the Ma'afa, how that experience has shaped faith, but also that us being able to not simply respond, but to, in many ways, Black people have had to develop their own conceptions of the kingdom of heaven and what that would look like on earth, and how does God see us when we're given so many untruths about faith. So that was a little long story long, but
no, I appreciate it. Thank you. You mentioned how sometimes you can get excited when you have students who also have a strong faith. So how is your work as a teacher informed by Black studies, or even like the transdisciplinary nature that you come to Black studies with?
Yeah. So, Dr. Newby, I come from a family of teachers. My mom was a teacher of science. My aunt, my sister is Dr. Christy Smith. Shout out. She's over at Kennesaw State University. Come from a family of teachers, right? And so for me, I see the need. I'm fulfilling a need. But I told you earlier, it's a calling. So I come in the tradition of the griot, but I prefer to use the word jali, like the storyteller in African tradition to keep up the history. But jali, I like that as an African word because that was the keeper of the bloodline, to quote Dr. Greg Carr. So I literally see myself as one of my cousins. He referred to me as a bridge to the ancestors. He said, you're a bridge, a walking bridge to the ancestors. So I bring that into the classroom, but let me use an analogy to kind of tie this up in terms of my need as a teacher. So there's a gentleman, Dr. Larry Glasgow, who was my dissertation advisor at the University of Pittsburgh, the first Black professor when I came to Pitt, 1997, as a grad student. He was the first Black professor I was introduced to, and he kept me under his wing. Now, I need to take the audience back to 1969. The Black students at the University of Pittsburgh in the Black Action Society took over the student center, right? They had a list of demands. They were essentially fighting for a Black Studies department, Black historians in the history department. They wanted their stories to be told. Okay, this is after they're responding to the murder of Dr. King in '68. So by January of '69, this movement is in full effect. The leader of the Black Action Students Society at that time was Curtis Porter. Curtis Porter was the president. Now, Curtis Porter would go on to become the chancellor of Penn State Greater Allegheny. That's where my first job at Penn State was. So this young man who was the president of the BAS became a leader in education, was the chancellor of my campus. The first professor they hired, right, as part of their list of demands, the chancellor of the university negotiated with them, said, look, we're going to hire a Black history professor. Dr. Lawrence Glasgow was the professor they hired. So he would be at University of Pittsburgh when I got there, hired in, I think it was 71 when he was hired by Pitt. But when I got there in 97, he was still there. Right? So he was fresh out of grad school when they hired him in the 70s. But when I got there as a grad student, the need he fulfilled was to be my mentor. But even more than that, right? It was almost like a disciple within the field. So as I understand that I'm serving a need. Now, as a scholar, so that's as a teacher, I see that as need. As a scholar, the thing that I want to emphasize, Doc, is my work, from my public intellectual endeavors to my community service, the things I do in the classroom is always bent towards freedom. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel like a lot of scholars, their research is about the people, but it's not necessarily for the people.
Mhm.
Right? I come to you, as I heard Toni Morrison say, like I write out of the culture, for the culture, through the culture, and I stay in the culture. Right? Like it's always bent towards the people. So one of my great friends, the August Congresswoman Summer Lee, she said something to me. She said, a great warrior never leaves anything on the shelf. And so in this freedom struggle, if we believe that knowledge of self, Black studies is a form of empowerment, we don't leave it on the shelf, right? We use it not only in this battle for freedom, but also as part of our healing and keeping alive the Black radical imagination. Because I don't want students to feel like Black people have always operated in response to oppression. No, we have our own imagination. Right? We're building our own worlds. But Black studies to me is just, as a teacher and scholar, where is your work directed? And mine is always aimed at freedom. Always.
Thank you. So since you started to mention your scholarly work specifically, do you want to talk a little bit about what your current project is and how Black Studies has influenced that as well?
Okay. Part of it, I'm always moving because I feel like, in the tradition of the ancestors, many of those scholars were transdisciplinary, right? Renaissance men and women. So one of the things, my dissertation was on Black jazz artists in Pittsburgh, in particular, post-Civil War, the Golden Age in Pittsburgh. But my current book project, or at least one of my projects currently, is I'm working with Dr. Justin DeSensu, who's a white gentleman who teaches at Penn State as well. And so the 50th anniversary of hip hop, if we think of it as being birthed in 73, we were just talking about our love for hip hop, him being a gentleman from the North and being white, me being a Black man from the South, and both sharing this mutual love for hip hop. And of course, the political climate, what we're trying to do with this book is help America understand things they can learn from hip hop culture after its 50 years. What things from hip hop culture can, let's be honest, in America that's in crisis, which is not necessarily anything new. What can they learn from this culture that sprung from a period of despair right after, kind of the tail end of the civil rights movement? So that's just a little tease for the eventual bestseller. I'm speaking into existence, right? But yeah, that's what I'm working on now, along with some other things, some artistic projects, some hip hop workshops. But that's the current book project.
Well, thank you for that. I'm definitely interested to see that unfold and read that when it comes out. So
Mhm.
it should be a valuable contribution to these conversations that we have, particularly
Sure,
right now. So,
sure.
so do you want to say any more about the retention program that you work with and I believe help to found, correct?
Oh, absolutely. The I got it was I came to Penn State Greater Allegheny, or I was called because my initial desire was to teach at a black college. Right, I grew up through the '80s and '90s, so a different world was a part of my
Mhm.
upbringing. So I actually thought that Penn was called Penn State McKeesport at the time. I actually thought it would be kind of a pit stop before I found where I wanted. Here I am 18 years later, literally a whole generation. So in 2009, one of my mentors at that campus is Dr. Anthony Mitchell, a great, not only African historian, but scholar in Black education. And what happened is, when at the University of Pittsburgh, I was working with Black males. They had a low retention rate, even there, much bigger campus, main campus. Then I moved to Penn State Greater Allegheny, which is a satellite campus within the Penn State system. And we still had a retention problem with Black males. Now, our campus is primarily, or we get a large percentage of first generation low income students. So you remember, first generation, there's no blueprint. I've had students say,
Mhm.
I'm the first one in my neighborhood, not my family, in my neighborhood to make it to college. So you're dealing with imposter syndrome, but also a sense of, okay, is this the finish line, right? Like, I made it here. Like, where do I go? I don't even know what to do with this opportunity. So one of the things we try to do is, how do we help these young men matriculate? So we create this program. At that time, it was called the AMP program, kind of amplifying the experience for Black men. And again, this is before the season where people are trying to make DEI a villain. And so it was a little easier in academia to
Mhm.
create this special programming. And so what we're trying to do, we started off, right? You start off trying to make this one need of, how do we increase the graduation rates, right? And make sure they get that degree. And then you realize, oh, they need um, places of belonging. They need more than actually, like, this is how I can be successful in the classroom. They need a fraternity. They need a brotherhood. They need a rites of passage. And so what we begin to do is study Afrocentric uh, rites of passage programs, and we really tried to replicate that. We had the elder scholar, Brother Tony, as he was known as, Dr. Mitchell, and then me being the younger scholar. I was in my 30s then, and creating this village, right? In Africa, you think African tradition, you think of the village, the elders,
Mhm.
and we tried to create this experience where it was a refuge for these young men once a week, kind of serving as their freshman orientation experience. And eventually what you see over time is I think over 10 years, I forgot to mention, we are writing an article about what we learned from 10 years of being in creating this retention program. And and I'll just summarize that briefly. What we learned is, we're not only, here are some effective techniques to help students of color adapt to these environments. So we had Black males, Latino males, Latino males, Caribbean. Um, how can they adapt and thrive, right? But also, how do you build a better infrastructure that connects their high school experiences to uh, college? So you're not simply taking in young people and throwing them into these classes and saying, "Hey, Dr. White, Brother Tony, just save them. Just put your magic on them so that they can get through." No, you're creating a more uh, um, uh, better links from these various high schools, so you can understand some of the deficits, so you can help them say, hey, this is what you need to start prepping these young people for before they get here. And I think also, Dr. Nubi, what we've learned and what we're writing about is, and I'm trying to, without giving away everything, but what do you do with the losses? Right. So in academia, we always want to show people, like, here's the solution. Right. We came up, here's the data that shows you, here is how you get 100% graduation rate. But what if you don't? And yet, what would happen is, even if we couldn't always get the graduation or retention rates like we wanted, we would run across these we've had young men go to Ivy League entrepreneurs, but also go to prison, right? That were in our program, right? That didn't get their degrees, going to the military, whatever. and you run across them in the street, and they will still be so thankful for the experience. I didn't get my degree, but you and Brother Tony, y'all meant something to us, right? There was something, you filled in a gap that they couldn't always articulate, but we want to let you know that that was valuable. And as an academic, that's a hard thing to write about, right? Because we want show efficacy, effective practices. And so that the part of me that's connected to God had to be like, well, realize that you aren't always going to see kind of the fruit of your efforts. And maybe it's almost arrogance to assume that, everything you come up with is going to be this magic solution. You don't know in real time always the impact you're having on young men. So how do you write about and that's where I think we kind of, in order to write about it, we kind of turn to storytelling, of kind of telling people some of the stories of, we saw how this young man went from that to now he's married, has kids, and now he's coming back to our campus to help other young brothers, or just, those kind of things where the, your presence, the time spent ministering, pouring into these young people, is still valuable. So the Brother Tony, I'm indebted to him for teaching me as an academic how my heart could be much bigger than simply me trying to get tenure. Or when I came to Penn State, I wanted to be one of the best teachers that ever did it. I told students they're gonna hang my jersey in the rafters when I finish. And then you realize once people are telling you you're the greatest professor, that's not enough. Right? There has to be something more to this profession than people simply winning awards, winning Excellence of Teachers Awards. And I needed, it was a feeling I was chasing after, like I was asking God to, show me a deeper purpose. And a lot of times that is pouring into these young people's lives and being a part of that, much further than their graduation.
Thank you. One, I think that the work that you have done in the program is important, and very reflective of Black studies as a field, right?
Sure.
Like starting in the community and making sure you have those ties to the community is so important in Black studies as a whole. But I also think that is super important in terms of, it might not be the measurable outcome that you envisioned when you started, but that does not make it less important or less worthy of recounting. There's value in everything.
Yes.
And I think so often, particularly in Black studies courses, you might not see the payoff for a student in their tenure that time, right? You might have a student who takes your class, an undergrad class with you, and then maybe you will see them 10 years later and it clicked and they got it. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they went into Black studies as a major or committed their life to the cause. That's something that it was a seed that was planted that grew later in a way that was helpful.
Yes.
Or even if it hasn't grown yet, right? Like running into people who the seed is still there because it meant something. And I think that's so important when we talk about Black studies and what it can do, particularly in these times when DEI, ethnic studies, Black studies are all under attack, right? Like these are seeds that are being planted that we might not see flower right now.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that they're not going to, right?
Oh yeah. Yeah, Doc, they coming for us. Angela Davis, they come for you in the morning, right? They coming for us. But I don't think they have an inkling of what they're facing. So yeah, I agree with you. My freedom struggle class, you got me thinking back. It's one of my favorite. I'm teaching that this semester is Black freedom struggles, and it's not only helping our Black students, but the white students, watching it be transformative for them. I remember a young lady who was, she was simply there translating with my class for, I think the other student, I believe, was deaf or something. So the young lady had to translate and take notes for her. So she wasn't even enrolled. And I remember her after the semester was over, saying that she said, I wept one day when you were doing a lesson on black love, and just how strenuous an exercise that she said I'm there just on the Zoom screen, right? And she said I'm listening, and she said it made me weep. And so it's yeah, I love it. But yeah, planting those seeds. Mm-hmm.
So building on that, right, and the seeds that have been planted and arguably like flower in all of us who are in this field now in the
Yes.
past, what about the past of Black studies is most interesting to you?
Ah, um, well, let me speak in terms of the Black studies critically. I think about it from that lens first, and then I'll talk about it what excites me. Critically, there is this gentleman, Pat Conkey, was a conservative minister who moved out of right-wing evangelicalism because of the Trump movement. And now he's pushing against that. So I was listening to a lecture he did on the he mentioned in this lecture, the Black church. He's a white male. And he says, what I love about the Black church is it was never the church of empire. Like it always spoke for the least of these, right? Those who were being oppressed. Mm-hmm. And so as I relate that to Black studies, Dr. Newby, I said, ooh, that's good, because Black studies was never the discipline of empire, right? It comes out of, you have this is what history has been defined as, right? It comes out, it's resisting that, but it's also the creativity of the Black radical imagination, right? It's like, no, we're going to come holistically and interrupt this kind of these false and incomplete histories that we've been given. It's that rebel music, as Bob Marley would say, right? It comes with that kind of energy. And so from a critical standpoint, I love that about Black studies, and that is the critique is built in, the ability to think differently, to see the world through your own eyes, as a Black person, part of this diaspora, is built in. So that's from a critical standpoint, I always bring that in. This is not the discipline of colonizers, right? It was not birthed that way. And what excites me in particular, just to go back to this, was like the finding yourself, locating yourself in this history. It's hard to articulate what it's like, to discover, right? To take the cover off American history and say, wait a minute, Dr. Ivan Van Sertima says that Africans were here on the continent North America before Columbus. What? Like what? Right? They were already experimenting with ways to create steel and do work with iron way before the Europeans come. Right? There were these great kingdoms, and to begin to see yourself in places where you were once invisible. Like, who created country music? Like, wait a minute, wait a minute, right? And so this is just like the excitement of doing. I guess it's almost like archaeology as you go through the archives, and constantly finding yourself and learning to love yourself, Dr. Newby, the good and the bad. Langston Hughes said, I'm going to write about the wino and about Obama, so to speak, right? And love them all. So I think that those things excite me. The critical part of Black studies being built on critique, and the ability to critique and create something that's against so much of the harmful history we've been given or incomplete. But also it's the self-discovery that excites me.
Thank you. So, building on that, what interests you or excites you about the future of the field? Where are we going? Maybe even like, what questions do you think we should be asking in this moment that we're living through right now?
Well, what excites me, as I mentioned before, right now, is self-discovery. And that goes to Dr. John Henrik Clarke's idea that as a Black historian, storyteller, you need to make sure that Black people are inserted into a respectful commentary of history. He says that a people can only be oppressed if they don't understand, if they don't have a sense of their place in history, right? There
Mhm.
needs to be a respectful commentary of our journey that continues. And then, so I'm always rooted in that. I'm a storyteller, Dr. Newby. I'm a storyteller, but I'm a truth teller. I think about Nikki Giovanni, the late, great, my beloved Nikki Giovanni, when she wrote the poem towards Tupac. She said, as terrifying as son to vampires, Tupac told the truth, right? There's roaches in your kitchen, right? And how terrifying this notion is to people who want to keep the truth away from our young people. And they want to keep it away from themselves too, right? That's a sign of immaturity, adolescence, grow up. But what excites me about the future of this field, I need you to envision, Dr. Newby, to dream with me for a little bit. 4 godsons I have, Kristen, Cannon, KJ, Caleb. And I want them, as they go through K through 12 and into higher ed, I want them to look back on this history. I want, as me as a Black Studies practitioner, I want them to be able to look back on the history as I, myself and my colleagues, we continue to stack these stories on top of these false histories, right? Build houses on the ruins and make these false caricatures, these archetypes of us, make them fossils, right? Because we come in like a flood of stories, a flood of truth, with the kind of work that we're doing, the research, the constant, in many ways, it's a new type of erasure, right? We are erasing the lies and erasing the invisibility. And so we begin to think about what would it look like for generations that come after to begin to look back through their history books and see a much fuller picture of what Black people have accomplished, what our Black women have done, right? What the diaspora has contributed. W.E.B. Du Bois has one of the books I use for my Black Studies courses, The Gift of Black Folk. And I love that. I mean, he goes through how they contribute in different areas, but he even breaks down things like their religious practice, or even just the understanding with somebody like Alvin Ailey and production like Revelation, like what that does for the human spirit, like just the ways in which we express ourselves, what that contributes to humanity. So I just want you to envision a world where when we start to as we educate our children, we give them knowledge of self, where they begin to like have a whole different picture of who they are. And they're, even if we have to do it outside of the traditional education system, because again, if we look back at our Black ancestors in the 1800s, they never stopped, and this is Dr. Gholdy Muhammad's work, they never stopped at just the school standards, right? They were saying, no, you better be reading this newspaper and learn what you're doing across the world. You're a world citizen, right? Go beyond just, no, you learn how to read, so then you could take that reading and help the people, right? And become a citizen who's a productive member of society, not just to pass a test, right? Or just to get a degree. Like, it's about the thing that understanding that you're a first class citizen, but that you were here for a much greater purpose than you could even see. Reading is just a avenue to freedom. So I do it. I practice. I engage in Black studies as a calling, but also as a way of rearranging the future, what that can look like for our children, but also practicing the African concept of Sankofa, of looking back into our past and taking those good things and bringing them to the present to help us move forward. Go back and get it. Go back and get those things that that the ancestors have left, with us. Be that bridge to the ancestors, and help us continue to contribute to humanity. So this is what I do till the casket drop, Dr. Newby. I'm in love with Black studies. So
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your perspective, and the work that you continue to engage in. Is there
mhm.
anything else you'd like to add before we end and I give you some of your summer back?
Well, one of the quotes I like. Well, first of all, thank you for inviting me into this forum. I looked through some of the other interviews, and it's just I feel so honored to stand alongside these other great voices and soldiers in this movement. I think about something that Nikki Giovanni said. Well, 2 things. Dr. Martin Luther King, as he was getting closer to his death, talked about finding something in your life that you're really willing to die for. But he said, if you go your whole life and you never find anything that you're willing to die for, you haven't lived, right? You've only practiced, you've been acting, right? You haven't truly lived. So I'm grateful to, that God has led me to something um, that's a burden. I wake up every day wanting to pour this history into my people and to people generally. And then also something Nikki Giovanni said, I always remember, she says, Black love is Black wealth. Black love is Black wealth. Black love is Black wealth. And so I carry that. Um, I hope that students not only, I hope they not only accumulate knowledge in hopes of making them stronger humans and advocates in the freedom struggle, but I also hope they remember the love they felt in this history, like how it can make you feel, and they can pass that on. And I say that with a mother who was she's a tremendous storyteller. And if you ever watch Black people tell stories to the younger, you will see that they're not only passing out the wisdom of the story, but there's a love there. Like, I need you to listen to this. I'm taking something from my spirit. I'm making it tangible for you, and this is going to help you long after I'm gone. This is going to help carry you. So I think that this is what this history can do. It can help. It can sustain us in darkness, but also it gives me and others light, sunshine. So I'm grateful to practice Black studies daily.
Absolutely. I really like the bridge to the ancestors. Like that phrasing, I think is a helpful reminder of the importance of the past to where we are right now. And the strategies and the love and the resilience that our ancestors had, right? Being able to bring that into the present is a helpful reminder that, like, we've been doing this, like, as people, and we will continue to do this. You just gotta remember that you do have that bridge. Nobody's out here by themselves. We have that connection that will help get us through, in the same way that it helped so many of our ancestors get through. So I really like that phrasing, and I appreciate how you summarize that there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah.
All right. Well, I will give you back your time. Thank you so much again for being here. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
Likewise. Likewise. Thank you for the opportunity.